The recent downfall and overthrow of the Assad regime in Syria immediately brings to mind where we headed. What's next? What will happen in that country? How will it affect the region? But the question is a lot bigger than that. The confrontations around the world, the upheavals in the Middle East, Israel facing its enemies, Iran, its proxies, Syria, of course, a major part of that axis that Iran was building, Hamas, Hezbollah, and other countries around the world, South Korea, Ukraine, Europe, all brings to mind the biggest question of all. What does the future hold? Where are we headed? Because on a short-term level, obviously, we think of what has to be done immediately. But does this portend, does this give us a picture of the future? And what will actually happen then? Sometimes, maybe not just sometimes, always, the best way to understand what's coming ahead of us is by looking back. History is the greatest teacher. So indeed, when we look back all the way to the biblical roots of today's confrontations, we can find direction, guidance, and a deeper understanding of the forces at work and where this can ultimately lead to, and above all, our role, what we can do in this unfolding drama. So please join me in this very critical and important conversation. Jacob and Esau. A battle for the future. Jacob and Esau. A battle for the future. Hi, this is Simon Jacobson, and we'll be speaking about Jacob and Esau, a battle for the future. This program is dedicated in honor of Tyler Scholl, with gratitude for his kind and inspiring feedback. With the recent downfall, overthrow of the Assad government regime in Syria, we're talking about over 50 years of control. Of course, immediately creates chaos, disruption. But the big question rises, where is this headed? Will it create more upheaval, or will there be greater order in the world and the countries around that area, which of course are going through its own upheavals, the Middle East, Israel, under attack by Iran and its proxies, which of course has taken a big hit now with Syria's fall. Hezbollah, Hamas. And of course, when you look around the world and you see the disruption in many countries. So they're the short-term things that we look at, but the long-term. Is there a way to understand these events in broader context? And what we can do, each of us, in helping the world evolve to a better place? And the answer is yes, indeed. The best teacher of all is history. You want to understand the future, you need to go back into the past. So I turn to the Bible, as many do, as millions do. The biblical events, in many ways, planted the seeds and are the roots of the events that are happening today. Not just today, throughout history. Confrontations didn't begin in the 21st or 20th century. So we go back to the story of Jacob and Esau, the twin brothers, born to the biblical Isaac and Rebekah. And they were battling not just as adults and not just as children in their mother's womb. The Bible tells us there are two nations inside you, Rebekah. Two archetypes. Brothers, twins, but alter egos. One will be a scholar, a sincere, wholesome, introspective individual, a man of the books. The other will be a hunter, a warrior. So though they are brothers, they represent very two different ends of the spectrum. And indeed, they battle. And ultimately, they do reconcile, at least partially. But we're told that they represent two archetypes, two forces that would dominate throughout history and affect us all, both personally, globally, and cosmically. And that they would ultimately make their peace. So all the convulsions you see in the world around us, in many ways, is playing out in macrocosm, what was happening in microcosm, these two individuals, who weren't individuals, two nations. So let's review that a bit, and we can then apply that the most fascinating way to events of today in a very seamless way, without forcing anything. What indeed was their battle? What were they fighting about? So let's begin on a personal note. We all have a struggle within each of us. That struggle is the struggle between survival and transcendence. There's a part of us that needs to survive. We'll use Darwinian language, survival of the fittest. Can also apply to social Darwinism. Dog eats dog. In Freudian terms, it is the id, the self, selfish desires of pleasure that dominate the most inherent part of who a human being is. And really, it's all of nature. Richard Dawkins calls it the selfish gene, that the very gene is selfish. That doesn't mean it can't be noble, because for the selfish purposes, for coexistence, for give and take. So if I get something, I give something in return. But ultimately, it's about survival. That's the driving force. But we have another voice within us. It's called the transcendent voice. It's a voice that survival is not enough. We need love, values, ideology, idealism. All the values we cherish. Freedom, human rights, dignity, respect, and less love. And they often conflict, because when you love someone, are you still in the survival of the fittest mode? So some people, even biological evolutionary thinkers, will say, yes, even love is a part of the selfish gene, because it's an extension of you in some ways, making you better. But there's another viewpoint, that there is something greater, and that we are essentially transcendent beings. Yes, we have a physical side, and therefore there's a selfish voice within us. And there's a battle going on between the two. Who will dominate? Will it be me? Or will I do something for another, even if I don't gain anything? And we've seen both. We've seen people sacrifice themselves, sacrifice their own comfort for others. And others who would not sacrifice anything, would sell their mother if it was good for them. So clearly you see these two voices, and that is Jacob and Esau fighting within us. Now this doesn't mean one is good or one is evil, because survival is not necessarily an evil thing. It's evil if it becomes destructive, and you step on others and you hurt others to save yourself. But you can harness that. We all need to protect ourselves. In the words of Hillel, the great sage, who said, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? So you do have to take care of yourself. But if I'm only for myself, what am I? So the challenge is, e pluribus unum, can we be many? And can the many lead to one? Can we find harmony within our diversity? And that was the battle. Ultimately, we need a balance between the two. You can say the battle between religion and science, which became dominant especially during the Enlightenment, 17th, 18th century, is very much the same. And I'm not talking about a corrupt religion, which was really the essence of what the battle was initially. I'm talking about faith and understanding that we need to answer to some higher authority. Or, the other extreme, we're self-made people, there is no God, and we'll work it out ourselves. There's a battle going on between the two. Moral relativism versus absolute morality. So the battle rages on so many different levels. So taking it from the individual to the global, nations of the world, the wars that have been fought. So yes, very often a war is about dominance, money, control, power. But there's always some ideology behind it. Even the distorted and obscene vision of Nazi ideology was that the Aryan race is the pure race, and that has to dominate, and everyone else have to be slaves or eliminated. We all understand how antithetical that is. Just to contrast that with the words of the Declaration of Independence, all people, all people are created equal. All men, meaning all people, are created equal, and by virtue of the Creator have inalienable rights. And no one person is better than another. There you have right there two conflicting theories. So if you go through history, the idea of dominance, of superiority, which has so much control, maybe the driving force of so many wars, deluding or convincing yourself that our race is superior and has to dominate, that may mean masking simple greed and selfishness to control, power, ego, arrogance, is only checked when you have the humility to answer to something greater than yourself. Abraham struggled with this. The grandfather of Jacob and Esau struggled with this. He grew up in a pagan world, a materialistic world that was dominated by this philosophy. In many ways, this philosophy dominates a lot of the world today. You see that when it comes to money and to power. Just go into any courthouse and see the amount of litigation going on. Materialism is a very powerful force. And that includes money and possessions and power and control and everything that and our equity, as it's called. But we all know there's another voice. So cynics dismiss that voice. Comes down to you could buy anyone. That's what the cynic will say. Everybody's values can be compromised if the price is right. Others will say that's not true. There are people that will not sell themselves, their families, their values. It may be a minority, but there's enough. And we definitely conceptually all feel that resonates more, to stand for something rather than just me, me, me. Even though we may resort and we may gravitate sometimes to the lowest common denominator. That's the battle. All this is encompassed in the Jacob and Esau battle. Can we reconcile? In a way, not just reconcile, can we integrate the material and the spiritual of our lives, the survival and the transcendent? And the answer is absolutely, and that's the end story. But to get to the end, we've been going through conflicts and wars, personally, interpersonally, nationally, and globally. Because if you think of it simply, and this may sound naive and simple, 8 billion people on this planet. Why do some people feel they need to kill others? Why do they feel that why the others are a threat to them? So of course they'll say, because you attacked us first. You took our land, you took our this, you took our that. Some will say it's the ideology because God wants us to cleanse this world from infidels. I mean, I'm not going to go through every argument, but bottom line is, there's a lack of humility and recognizing that we're all created by God. How about that? Fine, you want to inspire, educate, by all means, but not dominate, and definitely not become violent. So when you see fall of nations, a rise and fall of nations, that's the criteria and the barometer we need to use. To understand it well, we need to look at where is it headed. And I quoted the Declaration of Independence very deliberately. The United States is not a perfect country, and its people are not perfect, by no means. But that statement that all of us are created equal, and we all have inalienable rights, was not just said for Americans, and not just for whites, and not just for one race or color or culture, for every human being on this earth. Something inspired these founding fathers. It actually worked against them because it ultimately was the basis for abolishing slavery. And it's really based on the Bible. That's what Abraham was teaching his children and his grandchildren. But we have the conflict because we still have the self. We still have our own interests. And then we see, one second, you were creating the divine image, so was I. But you know what? I want your property. I want you to, I feel I should dominate. That's the conflict. So when you see a country like Syria fall, and everyone agrees, Assad, his father, were oppressive. The way they controlled was by removing dissent, by imprisoning, by torture. I mean, the worst possible way, with their secret police. Not the only country that has done that. So when you see a fall, of course, chaos ensues. But we'd like to hope for that this is for the better. And perhaps a government can rise that will be more recognizing of the dignity of every individual. This is not a contradiction to Islam or Christianity or whatever faith you're from. On the contrary, that's what faith dictates. Every human being created in the divine image. When I hear about the Abraham Accords, we hear about the Abraham Accords, countries who were at war and considered Islam and Judaism or Israel and its neighbors as being impossible to reconcile. No, that's a taste of the future. So the battle between Jacob and Esau is a battle for the future. What does the future hold? More of the same? Or can we see a progress? And I would say we absolutely see progress. Because as much as there are still wars going on, and tensions, and hatred, and violence, we don't need proof. We see what's been happening the last year, and before that. But generally speaking, the trajectory is one of progress. Christianity once terrorized the world. And it was tamed with the United States and then other Christian countries. The same can happen with radical Islam. And same will happen. But we can't just be bystanders. We need to be part of the process. We need to demand that. And when we see an overthrow of a government, of a country, we have to push in every way possible. I'm not saying all of us have political connections, but the mindset and the standard, especially with technology today, has to be that we have to join voices. Yes, time has come. Let Syria become a shining example of what a country can be. I know it sounds naive, it sounds like impossible with all the factions. But everyone thought all the thousands of years that it would be impossible to stop wars. And things have become better. There's more work to be done. That's why we're talking about it. So Jacob and Esau give us actually a vision of the future. First of all, telling us this conflict is not new. Secondly, telling what the real story of the conflict is ultimately the battle between matter and spirit. If you wish, between the divine and the diabolical, between higher purpose and survival. And we're not looking to eliminate or annihilate one or the other. The body and soul have to come together. The physical world has to become the fuel for spiritual energy. In other words, we have to spiritualize the material world by recognizing that it's not me. It's not my needs that drives existence. What drives existence is the mission of your life, the mission to serve, the mission to bring light, love, goodness, wherever you go. to respect the dignity of every soul and its rights. And if you feel there's something that you disagree with, or something that needs to be corrected, find ways to inspire, to educate. Obviously, I'm not getting now into self-defense. If you're under attack, you need to protect yourself. But the biggest goal of all is that light will ultimately dispel darkness. We'll be coming to the holiday of Hanukkah shortly, which, interesting, is a battle between the same two type of forces, the Maccabees and the Syrians. In many ways, it was between materialism and spirituality, and that's why it's celebrated not through war. It's celebrated through shining a light, through lighting candles, Hanukkah lights, because light dispels darkness. Because we're not talking here just to defend ourselves against an enemy. We're talking about bringing light into a dark world. So Jacob and Esau begins a battle for the future. And we are now thousands of years later and coming to the conclusion of that battle, which is one of total reconciliation, where all the nations of the world, in their diversity and the respect and dignity of every culture and color and faith, join together like one great cosmic symphony. And you and I can make a difference because you're either part of the problem or you're part of the solution. And how are you part of the solution? By speaking up, by sharing, by putting things into context. We talk about Syria, let's not just talk about the immediate politics or the immediate battles. Those that have to address that, let them address that. We have to think of it in terms of the archetypes. Where is this headed? When the evil regime falls, let's make sure that good replaces it the best possible way. If we keep on drilling home that message to ourselves and to others, that does make a difference. And it begins with your own internal battle between the Jacob and Esau within you to find ways to spiritualize the material. You're aggressive. You're a warrior, a hunter. Yes, hunt and sublimate the material world into, as I said, spiritual energy. That's the goal. And then they both can come together. You eat a meal. So you could eat like a glutton, just indulge, or you could eat the meal in a refined way and say to yourself, the energy that I'm getting from this meal, I will use to help another person. Technology. You can use technology in violent ways, in aggressive ways, in selfish ways, in nonsense ways. Or no, let's use technology to share a beautiful, kind word with someone. Share a loving message, an inspirational insight. So we always have the battle between the dark and the light. And darkness is not just meant to be vanquished, it's meant to be turned into light, transforming the darkness into light. Those were just some suggestions. I'm sure you apply yourself, you'll come up with many ideas. For yourself, for your children, for your family, for your friends, for colleagues. May this be the way each of us engages in this battle, but not with weapons, but with spiritual tools, to indeed refine this world and turn it into a divine, beautiful garden, where each of us contributes our unique light, our unique song, and also complements all others. Thank you so much. Simon Jacobson, meaningfullife.com. Please share these thoughts with others. Love to hear your feedback. Subscribe to our offerings. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. I look forward to continue our journey together. Be blessed and be well.
This program is brought to you by the Meaningful Life Center. Please help us continue our programs. Make even a small contribution at meaningfullife.com/donate.